All right. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy to have you all here today. We're really excited to jump into the state of recruiting. Just wanted to, again, thank you guys all for joining. It's such a crazy time right now, so we're really excited to have everybody here. We're excited to host this webinar with our friends at Aircall. They're a cloud-based system integration, a VoIP tool. Definitely check them out. My name is Colin Ponzo. I am the Implementations and Partnership Director here in North America for JobAdder. I'm also a recovering recruiter, about 10 years behind the desk. JobAdder is an ATS CRM. With everything that's been happening with the remote work, mass layoffs, social distancing, the recruiting field has been a little crazy lately. So today we're really going to dive in deep into how to build really good relationships, work on that candidate experience, keep your pipeline flowing, how working and recruiting remote is going to be more efficient for you from some industry experts that we've got here with us today. An overall overview of today. Before we get into the discussion, I'm going to let our talent experts introduce themselves. After that, we'll head into the panelist discussion, which should last about 25 minutes. Then we'll jump into a nice little Q&A session from about 1:30 to 2 o'clock Eastern time. The fun doesn't have to end there. You all can stick around for about 45 minutes after that and take advantage of the digital networking roulette, where you can sit around and have some nice little networking with people digitally as well. It's a great opportunity to chat with some of your peers one-on-one. The event will officially close at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so take your time to make any long-lasting connections. As a quick note, we will be recording this and sending it out shortly after, so feel free to share this with your networks and peers. If you have any questions during the webinar, head over to the chat on the right side of the panel, and one of our moderators will be happy to assist you. So without any further chatting for me for just this little second, we're going to start our introductions. We've got Stephen Guadagno. Stephen, why don't you kick it off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning, wherever you're based. My name is Stephen Guadagno. I've been with Adecco for the past 17 years as a vice president, and I manage technical on-sites around the country, as well as the Northwest region. And just anxious to contribute and see where the conversation takes us. And thanks, Colin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also got Devin from HubSpot.
Hi, everyone. My name is Devin Brown. I somewhat recently transitioned into a new role leading our global executive search function. But prior to that, for about 2.5 years, I led our growth recruiting team, which encompasses sales and customer success. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you all.
And then we've got Lindsey over here at Conga.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey Bowman. I'm a manager of talent acquisition at Conga. We are a SaaS company based just on the north side of Denver. I oversee our talent acquisition function. Some really exciting and fun news is that we were recently acquired, so it puts a spin on all of the stuff that I'm going to share today. My team went from 4 to 9 pretty much overnight, and so it's been a lot, but very exciting.
Awesome. And then we've got, last but not least, Roberta Shlonsky with SAM Consulting.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I am an HR professional, and I specialize in remote work. As well as that, I'm also a business professor specializing in HR management courses at the Okanagan School of Business in Kelowna, British Columbia. So I'm hailing to you all from Canada.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's get into it. So our first question is, I'm gonna immediately go to Devin, and then I want to hear from Lindsey as well. So there's a lot of people losing their jobs and looking for jobs right now. Obviously, recruiting is in flux. Roles are closing. How are you putting people at ease during this time when you have to deliver that unfortunate news that maybe an offer had to be pulled or a job's no longer open? How are you handling that, Devin?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We put a lot of thought into how we can support people during this time. And I think at the very least, helping people to know that they're not in this alone is really important in times like this. So there are two main kind of focus areas for us. One is transparency, and the other is just providing really valuable content. So with candidates in process, we do our best to make sure that we're giving them the full picture of if a role is on hold, why it is on hold, when we think it's going to potentially open back up, and making sure that the recruiters are holding themselves accountable to circle back and remind themselves to do that with candidates. Another thing we've tried is more targeted webinars to really ensure that our content is relevant and attendees feel comfortable asking questions. So, for example, we did a webinar for HubSpot alumni in particular. We did another one for active job seekers to make sure that we're tailoring our content. And we share out a bunch of information after that, whether it's a list of companies that are currently or offering up to do informational conversations or leveraging our networks, things like that. We've also written some blogs on remote interviewing, how people can leverage their networks. So I think making sure the content that you're producing is just really relevant for your audience has been kind of our focus.
No, I love that. I love, it seems something that's so simple, but it's something that we as recruiters sometimes can run through a little quickly, which is not closing that loop with those candidates. And I think it's really important that you guys are emphasizing that candidate experience and making sure you're closing that loop and keeping them informed and letting them know, hey, we really do have you on file. We really are going to possibly, keep reaching out to you. Here's some things that we've got going on with those webinars. That's some great stuff. Lindsey?
Yeah, Devin, that's a great idea about webinars and blogs. I might steal a page from your book. I would echo everything about transparency. I think that with so much uncertainty in the world right now, people really need to know kind of the why behind things. So on our team, definitely we've had to pause positions. We've also had to unfortunately rescind offers. And our team has handled it with, I'm so proud of our team, they've handled it with kind of that empathy of, understanding that it is a tough job market right now and really kind of delivering the why behind it and continuing to stay in touch. We'll also build a campaign with our recruiters and hiring managers to work together to continue to stay in touch with those candidates and to share some information like when we first paused and went remote, there's a video on the Denver Business Journal website that gives a tour of our office. So to kind of reach out and say this is what this is what we're all about. This is what our culture is all about, and to kind of get them to see that. I think the other piece of that that's really important to me is, as we're asking our recruiters to deliver this really challenging information, holding space for them to feel however they need to feel too, and to kind of work through the process. And I've had a lot of conversations with our team in delivering this to make sure that we're all sharing the same messaging and that, we're holding space for them to kind of go through the grief process too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, again, I love that reiteration on the transparency. And you're right. It's such a different time today than when we were all kind of in the trenches in 08, 09 with this kind of, hey, everything was like full steam ahead. And then it was like, it just like a flip of a switch and everything stopped. And so I love that you guys are giving people space, and that little bit of empathy, I think, goes a long way. People are really suffering out there. And so giving them that space to really have those feelings and not holding it against them, but almost even kind of like trying to coax out and be like, hey, it's all right. What can we do to help? That's awesome. Yeah,
definitely. One of the things that I learned prior to Conga, I worked at a staffing agency called Apple One. So Stephen, we were after your Deco team. So one of the things that I really learned there that our founder was big on is always providing a result. And so while we couldn't offer them a position or continue them in the process of, like Devin was saying, giving them materials or walking through job boards to look at and, offering to, make sure that I've offered to people to go through connections that I have on LinkedIn and to facilitate introductions and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think there's such a great theme here, too, to build off of. As recruiters, the one part of our job that I always loved was helping people find work. And even if that might not be with me, if I can get them in the door, if I really like that candidate and just really wanted to help them out, I'm absolutely thrilled to help. Even when I was at an agency where it's technically with a competitor, I still wanted that person to find work. And I think we're seeing a lot of really great companies and agencies come together and say, hey, at the end of the day, let's just try and see how many people we can help out. And maybe down the road, we'll see some fruit from it, but it's just important to put people first. So that's great to hear. Kind of rolling us into our second one here. Definitely want to hear from Devin on this one is how have you adjusted to remote interviews kind of keeping that candidate experience alive? And how different is it than what you guys were doing previously? And then of course, if there's any tips or tricks in there, we sure would love to hear those.
Yeah, definitely. And I can actually even send out a follow-up to share, because this is extremely timely. Awesome recruiting coordination team just released kind of a readout of the retrospective of remote interviewing over the past 2 months, like what went well, what did we learn? And so there are definitely some good tactical things that I came away with. So one thing we did was we actually just put together a 1-pager for tips for interviewing remotely. And so, yeah, we've kind of added that to our standard prep materials to share with candidates. And we've really encouraged them to try out the Zoom to ensure their video and audio work ahead of the interview.
Yeah.
It's technical difficulties are one of the biggest things. So what's also been important for us is that we don't stray too far from our best practices and process. So for example, we still have recruiters, greet a candidate before their first interview to make sure they've got all their questions answered, that there, no final things that they need clarified. And we also tell hiring managers to offer them a break to either go get some water, go to the bathroom. Like, these are standard things we do if someone's in the office. So we want to make sure that we're still operating that way.
Yeah.
And we've also found note taking has been a big one that came up on the feedback survey. So
Sure.
What we've also prepped hiring managers to do, if they do plan on taking notes on their computer versus writing them down, is to just call it out and say, hey,
Yes.
I don't want you to think I'm slacking.
Yes.
I don't want you to think I'm doing that. I'm just trying to capture all of the awesome information you're sharing with me, and to try and, mute themselves when it makes sense. But just being transparent about that has made such a big difference for candidates and really helped develop rapport.
I completely agree with that, and I'm so guilty of that. So I'm always saying, I'm not, because without this new age of video, it's like, I know you realize I'm not looking at you, but I've got my, even right now, I've got my little notebook here. I'm always writing my notes. I retain information. Please know I'm listening. I'm just kind of making my little scribbles. So I think that's great. That's a great reminder. Great.
Yeah. The team has also come up with some really creative ideas too. So we've been sending, there's an easy free link that you can send a virtual coffee to someone, and they basically can curate whether they want an espresso or a cappuccino. And it's like, good luck on your interviews today. And it's just a kind of a cute, hey, thinking of you, I'm your champion through the process thing. But I know this kind of ranges based on the resources you have, as far as company size. So for those of you that don't necessarily have a team that can put together a candidate survey, or you don't have the bandwidth to do that, just gathering feedback from candidates, whether it's after the face-to-face or even once they're hired, I think you'll get a ton of qualitative feedback from that will help you focus your efforts.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those tips. I think that's really great. And the little infographic you guys have, that's awesome. If you're willing to share that, I think that would be really
I'm happy to share it. Yeah.
All right. So our next question, I'm going to shoot to Lindsey, and then I'm going to kick it over to Steven, because full disclosure, Steven used to be my boss a few years back at the get-go, where I started my recruiting journey and started getting my saltiness. But we're going to talk a little bit about how does it look like remoting new hires, onboarding them remotely. So kind of what steps are you taking to ensure that your guys' company culture is still, prevalent throughout? How has that process changed? I imagine it's remote, so it's changed quite a bit. And then kind of what special focuses are you seeing? Are you guys, still pushing for people to start remotely? What challenges are there?
Yeah, that's a pretty loaded question. There's so much to it. So Conga pre-remote work, we used to do a week-long base camp at our HQ. So it was the first full week of every month. And it's really amazing. Annie Field is she's a training goddess, and pulled that together with some of the people on our team too. And would bring in people from all different kinds of the org. We did really cool things like Jeopardy and a scavenger hunt, and some really fun things to kind of build that cohort and that team dynamic. Mm-hmm. And so from a company standpoint, we moved that to a remote experience. And A couple things that we considered with that is I'm sure everybody's kind of feeling a little bit of like video meeting fatigue. Where especially for extroverts, I'm an extrovert, and like this is really cool, but I also like to be with people in person too. And so and especially if we're not used to working remote, it is a big change. So some of the things that we did were we condensed the sessions to be shorter because some of them would be 45 minutes to an hour. And so we condensed them to be a little bit shorter, more rich with content. So that way, people weren't on the video the entire time. One of the really cool things that the team did was we made a challenge before Basecamp, and each team that was having a new hire would create a welcome video. So the marketing team did like a Tiger King themed welcome video that they sent out to their new hires. One of the engineering teams did like kind of like a welcome to the Oasis and kind of a funny like this is paradise kind of theme. So we did that. From an individual, like my own team standpoint, with the acquisition, like I said, 5 new team members were added to my team. And so we're starting to work through, and a lot of them actually 3 of them work remote permanently. So I think they're pretty used to this type of interaction, but I definitely have some strong extroverts on my team. So we're working through just like some one-on-one get to know each other's. We're going to do a team meeting where we kind of like present ourselves and answer questions like, what's your work superpower? What song to play when you enter the room? And just some fun things like that so we can kind of get to know each other. But also we've been doing some happy hours, and there's a game, I think you can buy it. Rachel on our team really dominates this. It's Jackbox games, and you can play some really fun games in there to get to know each other. So I feel like from an onboarding, like an individual team perspective, figuring out, what the team needs, and then being able to kind of deliver on that and find creative ways to do that. So we've shifted a lot, but yeah, I think that I think we're doing well. I don't know.
It sounds like a lot of shift, but you guys are still really keeping that company culture alive and making sure people still feel included, which is huge.
Yeah.
And then on over to Steven. I know you've been doing quite a bit of onboarding of your guys' temp labor at different. I know you oversee about 1,000 different temps. So how's your guys' process changed since all of this started?
Colin, it's a mixed bag. First of all, you are an amazing recruiter, and we'd love to have you back. You really were. Colin was incredible. And you have a bright future ahead of you. So I'm glad to see you.
Good. I'm glad you had time to say that. That helps.
Seriously. You were wonderful. So, you guys, with Adecco, it's a large enterprise organization. We have about 30,000 people on assignment in all various segments across technical, non-technical. So one constant theme that we're always looking to implement and inject are efficiencies, especially with onboarding where there are volume situations. So a lot of our investment has been in digitization and standardization. So we're shoving out onboarding materials, documents via electronics, computer. And a lot of that process, I would say, is a little bit impersonable, but we do have people attached presiding over the process. And that is an area where we send out those onboarding materials, and we have a lot of people fall off through the process. So that's something we're absolutely tracking, trying to make it more of a personable experience, which is a struggle when you're looking at this large enterprise organization. But we're trying to implement efficiencies. We follow analytics quite a bit. So our goal is to get as many people onboarded as possible. And it's a mix. It could be virtual. And also, Colin, you know this, we have a lot of on-site operations where it's virtual to a point, but then all of a sudden they come to a client site and we have a representative there that's based there full time that will take over the onboarding in a more personable way. And they'll go through everything they need to know about the client, about Adecco, about the whole experience. So It's a little bit of everything, but right now, for sure, the biggest factor we're seeing is people showing up for their assignments. So we're trying to stay extremely close to people throughout the onboarding process and communicate with them as much as possible.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Stephen. I definitely was nice to hear that kind of that enterprise level when you're dealing with hundreds of people to onboard. All right, so this next one is going to be a little kind of a Devin Lindsey combo. But how has your guys' role changed now that industry slowed down? Like, are you finding that you have to wear like 1,000 different hats now? Are you finding yourself diving into areas that you aren't normally used to? And how are you still kind of maintaining, keeping the recruitment workflow and all that working forward? Devin?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So very luckily, we have no plans for layoffs, but part of that means solving for the business in the meantime. And I think also just solving for the customers in our DNA. So we did make a pretty aggressive pivot and have allocated some recruiters on our team to temporarily support customer-facing departments, such as sales and support, who really need the extra help right now. So a few of them are currently going through training and then are going to be in these roles temporarily for about 3 months, and we're going to see how it goes. But I think the reception from the recruiting team has been super positive because they're all looking at this as, one, an opportunity to get some exposure to different aspects of the business. Their roles will be waiting for them when they come back. And it's kind of a cool opportunity to learn something new. So that was one big thing that we did. What we also did as a team in partnership with our recruiting ops org is create a talent portal, which is basically a way for our team to submit project requests. So this could be based on a conversation you've had with a stakeholder. This could be recruiting related. This could just be a pet rock of yours that you've been wanting to do for a while. And then basically we have kind of a process where we identify recruiters with extra capacity and then assign people to run with these projects and have developed templates for project management. So I think I'm really interested hands out because it's giving us an opportunity to really improve our existing processes and things like that. And I think lastly, for those who are staying in recruiting on our team, we're really, really focusing on getting the fundamentals right. So whether that's doing an audit of our process, revamping our assessments or case studies, cleaning up data, like all of that is really super important right now when we have the time. So we're also holding recruiters accountable to that who are staying in their roles.
Awesome. No, I love that. And Lindsey, some thoughts?
So our team, when we went to a pause, I had a conversation with our team and just said, look, we're all going to be doing different things that we weren't hired to do. But my biggest focus is to make sure that we're working on projects and that the team is continuing to show value to the organization. Because at the end of the day, we're a bunch of recruiters hired to recruit, and we don't have positions to recruit on. So, thankfully, Conga's Conga 1.0 is a pretty scrappy company. We have, I've carried a lot of roles and hats and things that I love my experience there because I've been able to stretch and do things that I probably wouldn't be able to do within some other organizations. And that goes down to my team too. So we had quite a few HR and talent projects that we started or had the idea to do a while ago and put on pause to prioritize recruiting. So some of the things that we've been working on. So I also did oversee our employment branding.
Oh, okay.
So in looking at employment branding, my colleague Zach and I did an assessment on where are we doing well, where could we do better, where can we do refreshes, how can we, what goals do we have for ourselves in terms of metrics and everything. So really kind of delving into that. Our team, I had conversations with everyone to just kind of understand what their strengths are and where they wanted to take their career, and then aligned it with some of the projects within the company. So Rachel wanted to really dominate project management. So that base camp that we were talking about required a revamp. So she and Zach worked really closely with Annie to manage that project and revamp it and to kind of make it a little bit more robust and add to it. And I would say that if anyone's curious about what they can do during this time when they're not recruiting, is just find out where your company has gaps, build a business case, get the skills to fill that, and then build a business case to say, hey, I can do this.
Yeah.
Can I go for it? So I really feel like that's a good way to keep the skills sharp, and that's what we and where we.
And it's such a great time too to really reevaluate your tech stack, find stuff that might be more efficient. You have time for those demos now. Maybe do those demos, do a quick one, and then you can take that information to your leadership and say, hey, I found that if we do our onboarding this way, or, I found that these assessments work really well and the metrics are perfect and they're going to save us some money down the road, what have you. I think there's a lot of room for that. We are getting close on time. There's definitely one question I wanted to dive into with Roberta, which is, how can talent professionals lead and influence in these times of uncertainty, and how can they do that remotely? What's a remote way that they can really make the biggest impact and influence?
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, it's a great question, because HR professionals they're at the hub of what's going on in organizations, no matter the size of the organization. And I think we're seeing a focus to really looking at competencies. So whenever you're going all the way back to job analysis, what are the competencies that are necessary in actually developing the job descriptions whenever you're looking at postings? So from our research, the number one most important competency that people are looking for is communication. So when you look at communication, self-leadership, trustworthy, discipline, and then you're bringing that forth to looking for people who are going to be working in a remote environment, it really informs how you're recruiting, the kinds of questions you're asking, because you want to be able to ascertain if people are able to pull that off. Those things are important in face-to-face, but the importance is magnified even more in a remote setting. I think HR is also in the position to remind their team leads, everybody who's working, of the importance for a high level of empathy, providing clarity around expectations, and remembering that right now working from home is not the same as remote work. So as companies are moving forward and looking at transitioning to what their new normal may be, it's really thinking through how do we set up our people for success if they're going to continue working remotely. So things like, what are the policies we need to have in place? One of our consultants here in Kelowna, Shawnee Love, she outlined policies like sickness and absences, disclosure of illness, essential, non-essential travel, occupancy limits, vacation, remote work, cleaning and sanitizing policies. I mean, who's ever had that as one of the normal policies before? Hazard reporting, and really important, mental health. So the HR people are the ones who are going to bring these forth, and looking at your organization and saying what is, and this is something that Laurel Ferrer of Distribute Consulting just wrote about in Forbes magazine, what is the virtual workplace accessibility? What does that look like? What does asynchronous communication look like? And what is results-based tracking? So again, those are all coming from the HR professional and then spreading out through the company. So HR professionals are the ones who are really setting the course for where an organization is going, working in conjunction with the strategic plan of that organization. So it's very exciting to be in HR right now. Yeah,
I agree. I want to dive into some of these questions that were just getting rattled off. Everyone as well. We also have a poll, so feel free to answer that poll, and then we can maybe touch on some of those as we start getting some of those results in. So click on the little tab that says polls and fill that out for us. We'd love to see some responses there. Boy, we've got all sorts of good ones here. Let's see. I'd love to hear if anyone is encouraging their hiring managers to be more open to hiring remote employees, and how have some worked with hiring managers to overcome any pushback to remote workers? Devin, do you want to dive in on that one?
Yeah, this was a huge one before this crisis began that we were tackling as a team, because we had pockets of hiring managers who were open to this and other groups who weren't. And it was really hard to actually get everyone on the same page, particularly within our sales organization. But we did two things. What we did was we took a leader from the sales org who has really been a proponent of remote work and has made a number of successful hires that are currently remote. And we had him champion this project, and he worked with our people analytics team to pull a lot of data around the performance of a remote employee for the first 12 months in comparison to employees based in the office.
Sure.
And it turns out that they actually performed slightly better.
That doesn't surprise me as a remote person myself, but yeah, it's great to hear that data's out there.
Yeah. So I think, we all kind of prepared for the worst. We were a little bit nervous, but it was the complete opposite. And I think, leveraging that data to say it's all possible to make sure that they're onboarded and supported remotely. You just have to tweak your approach a little bit and here are some things that work. So we've since put together a full playbook and kind of a training for managers on that. And I found that once one manager has made a successful remote hire, it kind of starts to spread. So really leaning back on those successful case studies and also the last point is really nailing the profile. And because the reality is sometimes when you have someone who's going to be ramping up more autonomously, they might need different experience going into the role than someone who's going to be in the office. So you have to have an open, honest conversation about that and align on that first so that you're not getting to the end of the process and having to start all over.
Yeah. One great one here that I'd love to hear from you, Roberta, on is we're starting to hire remotely after COVID. How do I assess a candidate and their ability to thrive on a hybrid team? So what kind of characteristics do you find that, you see in great, effective remote employees?
I think it's a great question talking about hybrid teams, because it's not just hiring into hybrid teams, it's also about the ability to lead a hybrid team. So a hybrid team is you have some people who are working remotely and you have some people who are actually co-located. And so as a team leader, you've got a lot of balls in the air just to keep things going. So when you're hiring for a hybrid team or leading one, I think one of the most important things is to think remote first. So if anybody can work remotely, so you're hiring for people for remote teams, you're looking for the right competencies that they're going to be successful as a remote worker. But if you're hiring somebody in a hybrid team who is actually going to be co-located, they need to have a lot of those same competencies because they're working together. Mm-hmm. And so if you're approaching this with a remote first mindset and you think, okay, we're having this meeting and we're talking about important things, how are the people who are working remote going to be able to fully engage? And then let's set it up that way. Mm-hmm. So a practical thing could even be everybody is on Zoom for the meeting, whether they're co-located or not. Or you've got those really fun owl devices that is actually in a meeting. And so everybody is feeling engaged.
Yeah.
But knowing that people have those competencies that I mentioned earlier and searching for those competencies and be very, very specific in the questions. How would you do this is not necessarily going to be good enough. You're going to want to look at behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when you, and then dig into all of those different competencies, whether they've worked remotely or not, you still want to hear those stories.
Yeah. And then this next one, Stephen, I'm getting a lot asking on this and I'm happy to help out as well. But people really wanting to know from a lot of agency owners here is how are you, what advice do you have for them to attract clients during this climate right now?
There's always, it just depends on the segment. You guys understand this. There are some segments that are thriving, especially in the technology arena, in other areas, in non-technical areas such as distribution, warehouse, so it just depends on the segment. So I think that should also dictate, where you're going. And companies are always looking for talent. So Colin, this, one thing I always recommend is just thoughtful skill marketing, just staying in touch with your client. I tell that to everyone, whether at the sales level, at the recruiting level, just be thoughtful about it. Be consultative, be value add. If you see a great candidate, present them. Don't hound and chase your clients, but just stay close to them, check in, be, again, that consultative high-end approach. That's what I think our clients want to see. And it is very difficult right now. And I would say it just depends geographically. Some places in areas that haven't been impacted by the COVID-19 as much, those areas are opening up a little bit more. And I'll say like Texas is a perfect example. You see a lot of things that are thriving in that sector. There are still some sectors, Michigan, New York, that are very still closed off. So it just kind of depends. There's not one perfect answer, but the one constant would be communication, consultative, value add. You have a quality candidate, it's always helpful to present that to your stakeholder. It's a positive touch point on so many different levels.
Agreed. And that us, a lot of relationship building. So right now we've got this extra time, or you might not have a lot of open recs, but you've got time to reach out to clients. Now, I also think too, it's also good to say, look at your candidates as possible clients as well, right? There's a lot of people that are furloughed that are great candidates, and spend that time with them, get that relationship built, because you don't know where they might land. And if you had a good positive relationship with that recruiter, you might end up getting a new job where you're a manager and now you're tasked with hiring a whole team in the next 6 months, and you're going to want to reach out to that recruiter that was really nice to you, that you had a great relationship with, and see if they might be able to help you fill some of these requisitions. So I think you could be looking for clients everywhere right now. Next one, I want to task, Devin got asked a question specifically. You're very popular. How can we increase international recruitment from a global perspective? So how can they keep that international recruitment engine rolling through all of this?
That's an interesting one. So I think it depends on your hiring needs, right? So, and it also depends on if you have recruiting teams based in locations. But I think the place I would start is with your stakeholders or executive team. I think this is a really fantastic opportunity to do a deep dive to get an understanding of like where the gaps are on their teams and where they anticipate growth moving forward, even if they might not have roles being open right now. So I think like understanding that will give you an idea of what's coming down the pike, where you can start pipelining and potentially setting up opportunistic conversations, especially if I'm guessing some of your international offices are much smaller. It's not like they're going to have a ton of openings. So that's one thing. As far as, I'm not sure if they're getting at like a time zone issue. Do we have any clarification on that?
I don't have on that one. I think I think really too, you're talking about too, making sure that you've got that time too to keep that employee branding going. There's no reason why those efforts should stop just because you don't have recs open this minute, and that can kind of keep that engine rolling as well. And I know you talked in depth there about keeping that employment branding and how important that was. I know that right now, especially in international, right, that's such a bigger employment brand because you're across, not just state lines, you're across country lines. So,
I do also, I think it's important to be really culturally sensitive and be thoughtful about the markets that you're in. So the employees on the ground in those offices will give you the best pulse on topics that maybe candidates are going to want to hear about, or things that companies that we should be watching, particularly when it comes to like, it's very unfortunate, but there are going to be more candidates on the market now because of recent layoffs. So I think really leverage the teams in those offices as well, so that we're not being tone deaf and we're also taking, market nuances into account.
Yeah. And then I have a good one here for Lindsey. So some advice to candidates. So what can they do, right, while they're waiting to hear back from applying to a job? What kind of things do you think they can do to help increase their marketability as a candidate and help get them better prepared for when they do have a recruiter reach out to them?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is a really tough time to be a job seeker. So I think first and foremost, just recognize that the job searching process, while I think I think it's not like that this is outwardly spoken, it's a really emotional thing. So I think just kind of keeping that in mind, and thinking about ways that you can reach out and kind of wave your hand and get some attention with hiring managers or recruiters are, a LinkedIn message, a really customized LinkedIn message.
An actual personal email, yeah.
Yeah, I have to tell you, somebody applied to a director of brand and digital and called out I have on my profile that I'm a pizza enthusiast. So they asked me my thoughts on whether pineapple should be on pizza or not. And that's one that I...
Very hot topic. We don't have time to dive into that one today.
It is a very hot topic. But I also think, I was just talking about this with someone the other day, as recruiters, when we are a year or two into this, we're all going to look back and see that maybe there's a 6-month time period where people didn't have jobs, and it's because of this. And so it is really important to, how did you spend that time? So I'd recommend just going out and sharpening your skills, figuring out really where you want to continue to develop. What's really cool is that there are a lot of free conferences right now going virtual. There's a Power to Fly Diversity conference that I think is in June I'm attending. So thinking about just ways that you're sharpening your skills and ways that you're continuing to help people. So, if you're a recruiter and you have that skill, reaching out to people in your network to see how you also can help them, because then that becomes a much more memorable, a much more memorable thing.
And I think there was just that inherentness about us as recruiters too, that I know I felt for everyone when layoffs were happening. And I remember posting a few LinkedIn messages and replying to some old candidates of mine and saying, hey, you've got a resume, please send it over. I'm happy to just, I don't necessarily have any requisitions anymore, but I do have a great network. But I'm also happy to look over your resume and give you some tips and tricks and what to add and what to take out and how to make your resume a little bit, more attractive for a job. And it's always great to have we do kind of have that community. It sometimes feels as though we're a little inclusive, but we really do want to help out anyone and everyone. And I think people need to not be, the candidates out there in the field, don't be too scared to reach out and ask for help or ask for advice. Yeah. Even if, you did apply to my rec and might not be a fit for me, I still might have some advice for you. So by all means, don't be scared. I know it's putting yourself out there, but I think now's the time to do that. And recruiters have got a little extra time on their hands, and we do love helping people. So next one I had was Roberta.
Colin, if I could just add on to that, it's apropos to that subject. Adecco has a company called General Assembly. It's an upskilling company. And every Friday they offer about 3 classes for free. So to that point, apropos to that point, just look for opportunities where you could upskill, maybe learn something different. I think it's very relevant and shows something special for the job seeker.
That's a huge initiative, right?
I have one more point too to add on, because Lindsey, I think the LinkedIn comment was really important. And I think before you even take this step where you're making new connections or reaching out to people, do an audit of your profile. You are searchable. There are a lot of aspects of LinkedIn that I don't know if everyone knows, but for example, toggle on the fact that you should say that you're open to positions to recruiters, because recruiters are going to be doing those searches on LinkedIn. Make sure that you have keywords on your profile, because when we do Boolean searches, that's going to come up on your profile. And if it's not on there, it won't. Even highlight in your headline, I'm looking for new opportunities. I think calling that out and making sure you can be found and it's very clear that you're open is really important too. And it only takes a couple of them.
Yeah. Awesome.
There was one other thing that I had, if you don't mind. I know we're going through.
Let's see what we can do to help candidates out. I love this stuff.
I also think I'm a huge fan of the Clifton Gallup Strengths Finder assessment. And I think that this is also a great time to just kind of really take an inventory of your strengths, whether it's hard skill for a job or even just who you are, and figure out ways that you can continue to develop upon those strengths. So also not always looking at your weaknesses, but hey, what do I kill it at? And how can I be the Michael Jordan of that for my skill set?
That's hilarious. Literally
I have one more tip.
Yeah.
One more tip in this vein, and then I'll stop talking. But one thing that really resonated with me is when candidates try to differentiate themselves. And one thing I think is really cool, because there are a ton of free platforms right now, like Soapbox, as an example. You can send videos as kind of a short video cover letter and be able to talk a little bit about yourself and prove that you've done some research on the company and why you think you'd be a good fit for this role. I almost always respond to people when they do that, because they've really put the thought and time, and you get to see a little bit of their personality. And I think that's really important. So some people hate video. I hate looking at myself on video, but if you're open to it, I would say give it a shot. Chances are, even if there aren't open roles, you'll get a response.
Awesome. All right, so let's shift gears back towards recruiters here. So I've got one for Roberta. So results-based tracking is a big item that my clients are struggling with all the remote stuff going on. Do you have any suggestions on how to cope with, I think there's definitely that old mindset of if you work from home, you're going to sit on a couch all day and you're not going to do anything. You're going to do your laundry and no work will get done. Well, how do you respond to those that really maybe you either want to micromanage or at least want some sort of way to track that the work's actually getting done?
I think if employers realize that by saying that, they are really pointing a finger back at themselves. They are the people who have hired these people in the first place. If you trust them in a face-to-face setting, you should trust them no matter where they are. And we would be delusional to think that everybody who is sitting working face-to-face in an organization is 100% all out working. That's crazy. Yeah. So results-based tracking, it's focusing more on outcomes. Yeah. So there's this push now that we need to have software so that we see how many times the mouse is moving, how many clicks are happening. And I tell you, it shocks me and it saddens me.
Same.
When we're looking at remote work or any work, but remote work especially, trust is at the very core. And if your employer is telling you that I want to be watching you, like basically I'm putting a nanny camera on your computer so I can see what you're doing, I think it really goes back to what is the culture of the organization.
Yes.
Policies should be put in place around that. So results-based is being very clear on what are the outcomes. It's talking with the individual person. Here's the outcomes. This is what we need to measure. It's much more like agile or project management is the approach that you want to take, rather than everybody reporting in all the time on what they're doing. So trust your people. Build that trust into them, trust their ability, and trust that you have done a good job at hiring that person, and then focus it on what do we really need to accomplish and what are the measurables, and it'll go well.
That hits home so much. I've been remote for about 7 years, and I always say that same thing is more of a reflection on the manager and the company than it is on the person, because you should trust that you hired that person. And I believe anyone I've ever hired, they're going to do the job until I'm given a reason to leave.
Yeah. And when you're
at the end of the day, that's all I care about. Yeah.
And when you're hiring people, you need to keep that in mind. Is this a person that is demonstrating to you that they are trustworthy? Is there some kind of story from their past work experience that they can demonstrate to you that they are someone who says, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, and you can trust that I'm going to do it. So again, build it right in for the very beginning. But if you're transitioning people to work from home, trust them and have the conversation.
Yeah, I love that.
That's a great comment, Roberta. I love that, because I'm of that similar philosophy. I think it starts with hiring trustworthy people, and Colin was one of the guys too. You just always, it makes a big difference when you hire high character individuals, because whether they're remote or in an office, it makes such a huge difference, and it starts right there, and it's setting people up for success.
Totally. Sure. You don't want to hire someone who's not going to be successful. It's expensive for one thing, and the employer's not happy, the employee's not happy, and the people that they're going to be working with, you're just totally shredding a whole team. So take the time.
I would tell you, on an enterprise level with an enormous amount of recruiters nationwide, there is the thought process of measuring everything. Colin is acutely aware of this. And, in some areas it's helpful and in some it's not. I think it comes down to that relationship with the manager, expectations, and again, setting people up for success, hiring the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally agree.
And then a question for Devin and Lindsey, as far as college recruitment is concerned, how has that changed in this environment, right? There's no more able to go to career fairs. Job fairs seem to be kind of dead. But are you having your teams doing practice any virtual ones? Have you guys kind of put that on hold? And then how do you see that going forward?
Yeah. If there's one thing I would recommend, it's handshake. Handshake has been the most amazing platform for us. We really, like, the initial push when we decided to sign up with them was really to be more prescriptive about our reach and to really think about diversity and inclusion with our campus strategy, where we were limited by the recruiters on the team and how many campuses we could go to within a certain period. So it really helped us expand that. But since then, it's been a great way for us to keep in touch with candidates and let them know about webinars that we're putting on, and let them know about virtual meet and greets with the team that we would normally do, a couple weeks prior to their internship starting. So that's a huge call out there. But yeah, there's been a lot of adjustments that need to be made, but we've basically taken everything to be doing it over Zoom, and extra communicative around the content that we're sharing with them. We actually use HubSpot for recruiting, so we do a lot of sequences and campaigns through that, where we'll send content out on a regular basis to make sure that we're keeping in touch.
Perfect. Lindsey?
Yeah, so full transparency, we actually canceled our internship program for the summer. That was something that fell under my team too. But some of the things that I think of, we have a really close partnership with CU and DU in Boulder and Denver, and so we've been attending some of those virtual events. So they have like coffee with the company, and so students can come in and continue to just kind of ask us questions. So kind of an adaptation from a virtual career fair. I know that there are some virtual career fairs happening. The other thing I would say to continue campus recruiting is kind of like Devin said, sometimes, with some of that, Handshake is amazing and I'm very, very happy for it. But to continue some of those personal relationships with universities that fall within geos, I know I can count on a couple of hiring managers and alumni from different geos throughout the country that feel really passionate about giving back to the college, and so have leaned on them to continue to just stay engaged there.
Awesome. One more, I think, like Stephen, love your input on this one, is how would you develop a strategy around recruitment when mass layoffs have happened and the comeback's going to be, real gradual and slow? Assuming, we're talking anywhere between 30 to 40% layoffs, what kind of recruitment strategy do you think would best be in place to just help bring that ramp up back in?
It's very, very difficult, Colin. It's one of the things that's plaguing our business right now, because we actually have quite a few jobs, but getting people to get back into the workforce, especially with some of these additional programs like the CARES Act, is very difficult, extremely difficult. So I think it's just working very closely with these candidates, talking about long-term opportunities. And again, as markets open up, some of those other, windows or programs are closing. So we're trying to show people hey, we got to get you back to work. It's a long-term thing. Let's engage them as much as possible. But basically, it's an area we're struggling with right now, getting people back into the workforce. It's the number one issue. And I would say the largest contributing factor is some of these other programs that are supporting and paying people to stay home, whether it's to avoid exposure to COVID, coronavirus, or, they're just incented to stay where they're at. So it's for sure a big struggle. We haven't perfected the right magic potion. A lot of it is with our clients offering hazard pay, weekly bonuses, and those programs have been very instrumental in getting people back into the workforce. Again, just saying large chains, I can't mention them, but they're offering additional pay, and that's been very, very beneficial, or bonuses.
Sure.
If I could speak to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question is
one of the things,
you, Roberta.
Pardon?
I said I got another question right behind this one. So
okay,
good.
Okay. The thing I love about this question is that they've used the word strategy. So strategy insinuates that this is a company who wants to think it through and they want to do it right. And when you're looking from the perspective of an organization, this is an opportunity to sit down and look again at what are we doing, why are we doing, how we're doing it, and what do we need to do it. And so when we talk about laying people off, if there's a downsizing, the hope is that an organization is very, very strategic about doing that. And when we're reversing it and bringing people back into the workforce, organizations need to think through what are the roles that will help move the organization forward, and are the people that we're bringing back that are really necessary to help move it forward? Are there people that perhaps have been in one area that we know they're going to be even more vital in this area?
Mm-hmm.
So actually thinking it through and being strategic about how you're doing it, and understanding why you exist as an organization, and realizing that those people that you're bringing back, they are the backbone, hopefully, of your organization. And so be able to almost reverse engineer how that happens.
No, I love that. All right, this is our final question. This is for Roberta. We got about 2 minutes on this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So if someone's asked that some of their clients are really stuck on only wanting to see folks who are still employed, and how do you recommend guiding them to change that perception with today's job market?
I think I need a little bit more explanation on that.
Yeah, so they're having
people.
Clients right now that don't want to see someone that may have been laid off or may have had a gap in their employment history. And how do you get them to change that way of thinking? Because, I mean, in this environment, it's sad that way of thinking is still out there. But what kind of things? I mean, I know Devin had mentioned it. Stephen mentioned as well. Doing that continued learning while you're not working. I mean, so what kind of things do you think you could do to leverage a client to kind of change that way of thinking?
Yeah, I think so. So what the ladies outlined as far as from the candidate's perspective, how do you keep yourself really viable and attractive to be hired? But from the employer perspective, to try to take the conversation off the table as to whether this person is already employed or whether they're unemployed, and focus again on what is it that you're looking for, and realizing that the person that you're looking for has certain skills, has certain competencies, and whether they're working or not does not change the fact that they have those abilities that they're going to bring to the table. So if the employment status is totally put aside and you say, okay, this is what we need. These are the competencies. This is the experience. This is our culture. This is what we're looking for. And whether they're working or not does not change the fact that that is who this person is. And focus on the person, not on what their employment status is. You're going to do yourself out of possibly an amazing hire if you determine that only people who are employed are valuable people.
Yeah, agreed.
There's more. Prior to this whole pandemic, the unemployment rate in most markets was hovering around 3%. Right now, it's probably anywhere from 14%. And if you add on the furloughed employees, it's closer to 20%. So there is a lot of terrific talent available. So I would say what was applicable prior to this event is not applicable to it now.
Perfect. All right, I'm gonna let you all kind of run through any final remarks, any closing statements that you want to make, and let our crowd know something that they can do as a recruiter to really work themselves through this nice, awesome little sped of a pandemic we're going through. Devin?
Yeah, I think clean house, really focus on the fundamentals, take this time so that everything that you have from an operational perspective is in place so that you are ready to rock come when things turn around. And then, really prioritize keeping in touch with candidates and hold yourself accountable to follow-ups and be organized about it. I think that's the best way that when things pick back up and you have a new role, you'll be able to have, 5-10 people on hand that you've been in touch with.
Yeah. Stephen?
Well, first of all, thank you, Colin, for holding this forum. It's been fabulous. And I would echo those same thoughts that Devin had. I think it goes back to basics. I always shoot for that higher end touch, the Nordstrom level service model. So stay in touch with candidates, be thoughtful, be empathetic.
Lindsey?
I just want to say one thing, Colin. I hope your boss is on this call because Stephen has been. I hope. I know.
Should your boss be worried?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Devin and Steven said. I would also just say that now is a good time to also look around your organization and see where there might be gaps, and think about your long-term career trajectory. What's your end game? Where do you want to go, and what skills do you need to obtain to get there? And this can be a really good time to do that. But really, yeah, look around and see where there's gaps and see where you can add value.
Awesome. Roberta?
Yeah, I echo Stephen and the focus on empathy, grow it and practice it. I also definitely encourage to assess what's been working, assess what's not working. And as you move forward as organizations, focus on the work to be done versus focusing on where that work should be done.
Awesome. And I have to interject a tiny bit because my recruiter and me just keeps shining through, but we all have a little bit extra time, as Devin had mentioned. It's a great time to get more efficient. Check out your tech stack, look through stuff again, find something that's more efficient. And you have time now to really build some awesome relationship with candidates. And you get to play the long game here. You might not have a rec on your desk right now, but you might down the future. Also, that you don't know if that candidate might actually turn into a client down the road. So take that time. As Roberta and Stephen both said, provide that empathy. As Lindsey said, keep learning. And those candidates will become fruitful for you down the road, because we all know that purple squirrel knows a lot of other purple squirrels around him. And if you treat that purple squirrel well, you'll get to the introductions to the others. It will be fruitful for you. You just have to kind of stick it out and play that long game. Thank you guys all so much for this. This was a ton of fun for me. We do have the networking piece. So those of you that wish to stick around, please do. Again, thank you from all of us here at JobAdder and Aircall, and our panelists, Devin, Stephen, Roberta, and Lindsey. Your guys' expertise was wonderful. I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
That's great.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.